The projector starts, and so begins this episode of Movie Nights and Matinees, the podcast for people who enjoy movies from when we actually had to go to the movies. I'm your host, Bill Groves, and this is episode 13, Collecting and Projecting Classics, in which I'm joined by an old friend to talk about his years of collecting classic films and sharing them with audiences of various sizes.
What's your name?
Well, my name is Jim, but most people call me Jim.
I've been running these pictures, and now all of a sudden I gotta be an actor.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening. Those of you who have listened to episode 0 may recall that as my introduction to classic movies, I cited the time my dad took me to a screening of A Night at the Opera by a film society in my hometown of Tulsa. As it happens, in addition to seeing the Marx Brothers comedy for the first time, I also met a guy named Jim Reid, who was a little older than me and who happened to live only a few blocks from me. We became fast friends, and I suppose you could say he kind of became my mentor as I was discovering film classics, and especially silent movies. Since that time, he's amassed an impressive collection of films, and with some regularity, he's shared them with like-minded film fans, either in his own home or at scheduled events. He's here today to talk about his years of collecting and projecting. So, Jim, welcome to Movie Nights and Matinees.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, it's been a while. I mean, we've been Facebook friends and everything, but over the years, we've gone different directions geographically and career-wise and so forth. So this is actually the first time we've had a chance to have a conversation in a while.
Yeah.
I think back to that night it was a Wednesday night, February 13th, 1975.
Oh, you take better notes than I do.
Well, I was going to say, ask me how I know that. I know that because last fall, I made a visit back to Tulsa over a weekend, and I had compiled a bunch of stuff that I donated to the Tulsa Historical Society. A lot of Tulsa Roughneck stuff and things like that. And among the things that I dug out of, scrapbooks, photo albums, that sort of thing, were 2 membership cards for the Reflection Film Society. And of course, they had the date handwritten on them. So I know what night that was, that Night at the Opera screening. Now, I don't know that I ever thought about this before, but had you been going to those screenings prior to that? I would suspect so, but I don't know.
Can't tell you for certain, but I know my first one was a Marx Brothers film. I had it in my mind it was Duck Soup, but it may well have been Night at the Opera. So that may well have been my first attendance there too.
The only other one that specifically stands out in my mind of having seen there was The Big Store. It came along later.
What experience have you had in a department store?
I was a shoplifter for 3 years.
Think maybe also Day at the Races, somewhere along the line. But there was such a variety of films that they showed. And I find myself wishing that in addition to those membership cards, I had somehow managed to save those monthly schedules that they would send out that listed what films were coming out, because that would be fun to go back and look at. Greta Garbo and Cagney and Bogart and all kinds of stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. Now I think, and again, it's going back so many years, but you had already been collecting movies. I mean, at least 8 millimeter and maybe 16 by that time. So tell me how you got started with that. And for instance, what was the first film you acquired, what format and how did it start growing back then?
Well, the collecting thing started in 1970, my oldest brother got married. One of our family friends shot 8 millimeter movies of the wedding. I had an uncle who was down visiting from Boston for the wedding. And before he left, we got the films back. So Dad got a projector and we sat there in the living room at my house and started watching it. And the guy had left the outdoor filter in the camera so that everything shot inside was like total black. I mean, there was like nothing there. And he shot a bunch of stuff while they were shooting pictures in the church. So you can just see the flames on the candles. That's the only thing that you could see. And my uncle, who was kind of an interesting guy, just had a fit and was just cussing this guy out and all that. And we were like, well, what are you going to do? So he goes back to Boston. And about a week later, we get this big box on the porch, and it's from the Spiegel Catalog Company. And it's a complete GAF movie outfit with the camera and the projector and the screen. My dad was probably one of the worst photographers in the history of anybody who took a picture. I mean, he would get ready to take the picture and then look for the button. And while he's looking for the button, the lens is gone. So he either had no heads or from the neck up. So I kind of became the family photographer. And I did that for about a year and a half or so. And then we were on vacation up in Cape Cod in Hyannisport. And we went into a department store there, and I saw this display of Castle films. I had never seen that before. And just the idea that you could own these films was just like, I couldn't believe it. I didn't have much money, but I bought 2 or 3 of the little 50-footers, And that's all I had for about a year. I just played those nonstop, and I even re-edited them, trying to make one whole story out of it. So I had those 3 films, and I told one of my teachers about it at school, and he was a coach. And if you've ever been taught English or some history by a coach, they'll do anything to keep from actually teaching English or history, So he told me to bring the films in, and we would all go down to the room where they ran films, and I could run them for the class. So I go down there and I run my 3 little 50-footers, and they all like it. I don't know whether they liked it or they liked being out of class. But another guy there said, I brought one we had, and it was a Black Hawk print of 2 tars.
Classic Laurel and Hardy silent.
And that just opened my eyes. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And we ran it, and it was a complete film. And I was just like, I was gobsmacked, And so I wrote the address down off the box, and sent away for a catalog. And I got it. The first film I bought from Black Hawk was an early Laurel and Hardy Do Detectives Think, one of the very early ones. So that was a long answer to your short question, but that was the first Super 8 I got. And then in my senior year in high school, I used to go down and help out with the 16 millimeter projectors and stuff. And I get a call to go down to the library, and I went to Catholic school, and the nun that ran the library said, we just got brand new projectors in, and they were Bell and Howell auto loads, the big fancy ones, at the time, which actually were like film eaters anyway. But she said, so we've got these 2 new projectors, so we don't need the old ones. So do you want to buy them? I'll can sell them to you for $75. They were 2 RCA 400s, which are really nice old projectors, and they handled film really well. And so I gave her the $75, and I got both the projectors, only one of which worked. But so that was my first 16. And the first film I bought from Black Hawk, and it was The Dentist, W.C. Fields.
Yeah, and you gave me one of those for RCA 400s.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
did it work?
Well, oh gosh, that is an embarrassing story, because I had not been, well, just to back up a little bit in terms of my home movie experience. Dad had a standard 8 camera that he had been using for a number of years to take films of us when we were on vacation and that sort of thing. And I am so thankful that there was no audio with those cameras, because I a little kid just acting up for the camera and everything. I was obnoxious enough visually. I don't want to think what would have been like with sound added. And actually, he had picked up one or two of those little Castle 50 footers. I remember one of them was an Our Gang. Shiverin' Shakespeare, I think, was the one. Didn't really mean that much to me. I mean, it was just kind of a novelty because mostly, you know, if we set up the projector to watch something, it was going to be our home movies from vacation and so forth. But then when I met you, that was the same time. And again, I mentioned this, I think, to some extent in episode 0. Also discovered that the library had 8mm and Super 8 films that could be checked out. They also had 16 that could be checked out, but
actually, those 8mm are mostly my old stuff because I sold my entire 8mm collection to the library.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, but so I was watching a lot of those, and then, like I said, you and I having met, I think I first saw Harold Lloyd over at your house. I think you showed me a print of Haunted Spooks. That ended up being the only 16mm one that I ended up buying from Blackhawk. I mean, I would get the catalogs and, you know, love looking at them and everything, but in terms of saving up, you know, paper route money or whatever it was at the time, the only one I ever actually ended up buying was that print of Haunted Spooks. But in terms of the projector, the sound wasn't working on it. And I thought, well, gee, I wonder if there's anything that can happen to make it work. And looked at it, and I don't know how I learned it. Somebody said, okay, maybe it needs a new exciter lamp, which with the optical systems, you know, it's the bulb that shines through, and then the little soundtrack image that's on the side of the film, it shines through that, hits some sort of a cell that converts it to the audio, and, you know, there you go. I got a new exciter lamp. I ordered it from a photography shop or something like that. Put it in. No, it still didn't work. Well, it's okay. I mean, I watched Haunted Spooks, which was silent, not a problem. And eventually, I guess I needed money. I realized I probably wasn't going to be collecting any more 16mm. So a kid that I worked with at a video store, I sold it for a few bucks to him. And I told him, well, just be aware that the audio doesn't work. And so he comes over, and I'm showing him, you know, okay, here's how you thread it up, and here's this thing in here, and open it up. And I see this cord hanging loose. It's a phono plug. And I'll go, okay, and there's a little jack over there. And well, it seems like this ought to be plugged into that. So I plug it in. Bingo, had sound. So, okay, he got a better deal than he realized. Anyway, so that's kind of my my experience with those. I wish I still had some of those Blackhawk catalogs, because those are fun to look at.
A friend of mine here still has all his catalogs, and they've been digitizing them and putting them online.
Oh,
and if I find the link, I'll send it to you.
Okay, is it the Internet Archive? Maybe is that where they're going up, or something more dedicated? Okay, yeah, I'd like to see those. Those would be fun. Bring back a lot of memories. So, how many films do you have in your collection now?
I took notes. Hold on.
Oh.
16mm, I've got about 1,100. Blu-ray, I've got about 1,900, and then I've got a bunch of DVDs, and I've even got a bunch of laser discs in the closet, but I don't really do much with them.
Yeah, that was when I really became a collector, was when home video, you know, VHS came along, and I started recording and things like that, and then even more so with DVD. So Debbie and I have accumulated over the years what I refer to as an obscenely large collection, but not any actual celluloid film. I do have some laser discs still, and I've converted some of those.
Collecting thing is kind of a sickness,
DVD.
isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it sort of is. So you don't have any, at this point, any lingering 8mm or Super 8 that you were never able to get upgraded to 16 or anything?
Not really, no. I have, just for nostalgia's sake, I picked up some 8 and Super 8 prints recently. I just recently got an Elmo, I think 1200 8mm projector with sound, magnetic sound, and also. And I've got a few things. I've got the print of the Pilgrim, the Chaplin film,
right.
with the music track on it and all. And I've got a handful of, probably not more than, I don't know, maybe 30 8mm films, but they're all kind of stuck in a box. box somewhere. I don't really do much with them.
Okay. So there haven't been any that you just were never able to find a 16 millimeter equivalent for?
No, there's a few 16s that I haven't been able to find, but I wasn't able to find them on 8 millimeter either. So,
Okay. Well, what's been the hardest film for you to track down and add?
It's Why Girls Love Sailors, which is an early Laurel and Hardy, very early Laurel. And it was the only Laurel and Hardy Pathé film that was not sold by Blackhawk. There was another company that sold prints of it, so it was around. But like on eBay, I was always just too late to put my bid in, and I just never ended up getting the thing. And I ended up making friends with a guy named Ed Watts. Are you familiar with Raymond Rohauer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ed Watts was Raymond Rohauer's assistant.
Okay.
And he lived in New York, and he was at the time collecting a bunch of public domain Edgar Kennedy shorts. And there were a bunch he didn't have. And I had a friend here who specialized in public domain films. So I sent him a list of what this guy had, and there were some on the list that he needed. So my friend allowed me to send him up to New York, and he had prints made off those. And so from then on, he was like, anything you need, let me know, and I'll see if I can find it.
Wow.
And at the time, I was trying to complete my Laurel and Hardy collection, which I probably needed like another 10 or so prints. And he found me several of those. And so it got to the point where the only print that was left was Why Girls Love Sailors. I just wasn't able to find that. Then Ed ended up taking it, or his wife maybe took another job, and he moved to Germany. But we kept up a correspondence. And I get an email from him one day, and he said, I think I've found a print of Why Girls Love Sailors. And he said, but the guy doesn't want money for it. He wants a 16 millimeter print of Buster Keaton's The Goat.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I happened to have 2 prints of The Goat at that time. So I said, great. So I sent him the print of The Goat. And a few weeks later, I got my print of Why Girls Love Sailors. It came from Czechoslovakia. Yeah. So
was it a Czechoslovakian print?
No.
So
no,
it had
all English.
The regular English titles then?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I understand that you've got a pretty unique home theater. I mean, we think home theater these days, we're thinking, big screen, flat panel TV, surround sound, maybe video projector or something like that. But yours is more in the traditional vein. So tell us about that.
I've got 2 IKEA 300-watt xenon projectors that have the changeover mechanism in them. So
wow.
I used to, we'd do a break and everybody'd run and get something to drink every time I had to change a reel. But now we just keep going once I start, So I've got 2 of those, and then the screen is just like one whole wall down there.
Okay.
See. And I've also got got higher. There's a video projector there. And it actually does 3D. And I've got a bunch of 3D Blu-rays. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've been collecting those too. Just dreading the day when the 3D TV that we have fails and then have to change it. Although now I guess the thing that we'll probably do, I read about these ultra short throw projectors, these lasers, and apparently those are pretty impressive, but we'll still have to go to the active 3D rather than the passive that's so much easier. So do you still host screenings in your home theater?
Every month.
Okay. So it's on a schedule.
Yeah, this last Saturday, or a week ago yesterday, I did a guy named Joe with Spencer Tracy and Van Johnson and Irene Dunn.
You've got a lot of lives and a lot of planes under your control. I expect you to stay where you belong.
You said to take out the roundhouse, didn't you? You can't take it out at 12,000 feet.
Then make a report of that and we'll put it on special assignment.
When a tough job comes up, I won't make a report of it, and I won't assign it to somebody else. I'll do it myself.
And I've got cartoons and short subjects, and I've got a ton of trailers,
Yeah.
And so I just make a complete show, of the thing.
Yeah, that I was actually going to ask in terms of the types of films, the genres, and so forth. If you lean heavily towards silent films, or if you've got a pretty broad in terms of types, and genres and so forth in the collection.
Mostly, my interest is in comedy. I have a lot of comedy short subjects. I was working in TV for all those years. I was lucky enough to be around when several film packages were trashed and ended up getting those, So,
wow.
One, I was able to just mainly trade for other friends because there was nothing in the package I wanted. But then I worked at Channel 4 here in Dallas, and we, in the mid-90s, took over Channel 27. And when we did, they had gone over to the building and emptied it out of all the tape machines and switchers and everything that they could use at our station. At that point, I knew that they had done a lot of film stuff over there. So I went to our general manager and I said, I collect 16 millimeter film. What's going to happen to that film stuff that's still sitting over in that building? And he says, well, it'll probably go to a landfill somewhere. And I said, was there any chance I could have it? And he reached in his pocket, pulled out the key and said, lock it when you're done.
Oh, boy.
Yes. So I went over and there was a ton of film equipment, splicers, viewers, rewinds, all of that kind of stuff. And I found two boxes, one that had like 115 color Popeye cartoons. And the other one had about 80 low fade MGM prints, cartoons, including about 30 Tex Avery's.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that was my big hit there. And then there was also a complete film chain in there, which I had no use for, but I knew a guy who would probably be interested in it and had a little cash. So I called him and said, get a Ryder truck and come on over, And so he took the thing. And so, yeah, it was a pretty good deal all around. And then,
yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
So when did you start projecting films from your collection at film events? I mean, a couple that I know of, the Kansas City Silence I saw.
Well, Kansas Silent Film Festival.
Oh, that's what it's called. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Kansas Silent Film Festival.
It's in Topeka. Yeah.
Okay. So that sort of thing. I mean, was that the first one? Is that the only one, or are there others?
No. The first thing I did was at the Texas Theater down in Oak Cliff. I had a friend who had gotten to be good friends with the people that were running the Texas. And he told me that what he really wanted to do was an Our Gang retrospective. At the time, I was like, well, that's a commercial theater. I don't think I can run my films in a commercial theater. But I sent an email to David Shepard, who was the guy who had at the time owned the 16 millimeter rights to the Hal Roach Library. And he told me that if you advertise that we're going to have Our Gang Follies of 1938 at 2:30, that's theatrical. If you just say we're having an Our Gang retrospective, that's non-theatrical. As long if you don't name the titles. And so we put together a show, and I went and took my projectors up, and the balcony in the Texas at that time. Have you been to the Texas?
I have not. No.
Okay, it's a really nice theater now.
Yeah, I'd like to visit it.
Yeah, the first time I went there, though, the bottom floor was fine, but the top floor, there had been a fire, and they had pulled all the seats out. So it was just basically these huge cement steps. And as you were walking there, the bolts that held the seats in were still sticking up out of the floor. And it was really dark, so you really had to be careful.
Yeah.
But I went up there and I set up. At the time, I had two Kodak Pageant arc lamp projectors. And I set them up there and checked it out to see where I'd get the best picture from. And it was about halfway back in the balcony. So I ran that show, and it went really well. And I wanted to, get down. Not too many people showed up, which was unfortunate. But I went down to the lobby, just to talk to my friends and see how they liked it and all. And this guy walked up to me and said, Well, I want to thank you for this show. He said, I'm Rod McFarlane. Spanky was my brother. I said,
Wow.
oh, that's cool, and stood there and talked to him for quite a while. He was young enough that Spanky was already out of show business by the time he was born. So he had no memories of any of that. That was the first thing I did. And then they had the 80th anniversary of the Texas Theater. And they had a copy of a program that was printed for opening night back in 1932, I think. And it told what the complete show was, the short subjects and everything. So they asked me, can you put that show together? And I looked, and luckily it didn't name the exact shorts. It just said like a Mickey Mouse cartoon, a newsreel and all this. And I had enough stuff to cover that. But the feature was Buster Keaton, Parlor, Bedroom, and Bath, one of his MGM films. Yeah.
Right.
Which is PD. So we didn't have any problem there.
Say, what's your name?
Reginald Irving.
What business are you in?
I'm a sign tacker.
Of what?
Sign tacker. I go around putting signs on telegraph posts and fences and things.
Oh, I see. In the advertising business, huh?
Yeah.
Are you married?
Oh, no.
Have you ever had anything to do with women?
Oh, I used to sell vacuum cleaners.
And a friend of mine had an original print of that. So I borrowed that from him. And so that was the first show we've done. Since then, we've done the 85th anniversary and the 90th. I used the same short subjects for all of those shows. But by the time they did the 85th, they had already installed 35 millimeter projectors in there. So they got a print from Warner Brothers. Parlor, Bedroom, and Bath. Yeah. For the 90th, they took it off a Blu-ray or something, but maybe a DLP.
Okay.
PCP.
Now, the only other one I know of specifically, now we mentioned the Kansas Silence, which, is there anything to say about that one that interesting?
Well,
that's an ongoing annual thing, I guess, right?
Yeah. A friend of mine had been going since around 2000. And he kept telling me I needed to go. But the problem was it's the last weekend of February. I worked in the promotion department at a TV station, and we were always right in the middle of the February ratings book. So we were never allowed to take vacation during February. In about, I think, 2012, they changed over to, instead of having the rating books, having people meters. So we were rated every day. So at that point, it wasn't that important, the rating books. So I was able to start going with him up there to Topeka every year. And I went and just enjoyed the show. And I would talk to the projectionist, who was an older guy. I lived in Wichita. He and I got to be pretty friendly. So about 5 years ago maybe, went up there for it. And he said that he was tired of doing it because usually the weather was bad. So he said that he's retiring from doing the festival, and he suggested that I take over for him. So since then, every February, I unhook these projectors and we carry them up to Topeka. One year, we only had one film print, but there's usually, it's a 2-day thing. It starts Friday afternoon and goes all day Saturday. And there's usually some video in it, because restored prints, you're not going to find on 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
So they will run those off DVD. But
and are you involved in the process of selecting the titles that are going to be run, or do they just tell you, here's what we're doing?
I kind of advise on it, but I'm not, I don't really have any say so, and I volunteer my prints. I've got an Excel spreadsheet of all my collection, and I send that to the guy who is the president, and so they know they can go through and pick from there. But this last time, I brought 3 short subjects. I brought a Will Rogers, 2 Wagons Both Covered, and a Paul Parrott, which is like Uncovered Wagon or something like that, because we were showing the feature covered wagon.
Oh, no, it makes sense.
Yeah, so those are both. And there was another one I don't remember. Maybe it was a Keaton short. So I only supplied 3 film prints this last time.
And then the new ISIS Theater over in Fort Worth, which I turned the corner. Debbie and I, for vacation this year, we decided to kind of stay close to home, see some things in the region that we hadn't been to, because we went all out last year for our 20th and went to Hawaii. And one of the places we went was the Fort Worth Stockyards. And I think it was right after we had lunch, walking around, turn a corner, and there's the new ISIS Theater, which I had just recently learned about because of your connection to that. So what goes on there that you are involved in?
Well, I've known about that theater almost since I moved to Dallas. But as far as I knew, it was closed down, and it was pretty much kind of a wreck indoors. But I guess this guy went ahead and bought it and has spent a lot of money fixing it up because it's really beautiful inside. A friend of mine told me that they were running classic films during the week. So I went to, I think, the Sign of the Cross.
Cecil B. DeMille?
Yeah, the DeMille film, yeah. I went to that, and afterwards I was talking to the guy who is the programmer who sets up all the screenings, and everything was video. It was done on video there. So my friend was telling him, you should see his collection. He's got this huge 16 millimeter collection. And so he asked me, he said, well, do you think you could run them here? And I said, well, I'd have to look upstairs and see what the situation's like up there. So I went up there, and they had pretty much set up the booth for live concert stuff. They had a big audio board up there that pretty much ate up the whole room. Down at the end, there was this little roll-away table that was right there between the end of the board and the wall. And I said, well, I think if you pull that table out, I can probably get one projector in, which is kind of a problem if you're running features,
Mm-hmm. Then you do have to have the intermissions.
Yeah. But I also had a thing called a long play unit, which it's this little tower that has spindles on either side, and you can put 6,000-foot reels on it, and it stands up behind the projector.
Oh, okay.
And goes up and through a roller system, goes into the projector and out again and rewinds on the other side. So I was able to splice the features together. And I've done 3 features there, but it's only been maybe the past 3-4 months that I've done that. I mean, that was the first time I'd been to that theater. But I've done in Dallas, I've done a lot at the Texas. I went for 15 years. I don't know if you've been up to McKinney. In the middle of the town square, there's the old courthouse, which is really great. It looks like, the courthouse from To Kill a Mockingbird or something. It's really cool looking. But they've turned it into a performing arts center. And the North Texas chapter of the Theater Organ Society has their organ set up there. So I met one of the people that run it, and I ended up running film for that. And I usually supplied the film. So I would bring this silent feature up and run that. I did that close to 15 years, and I enjoyed that. But when the pandemic hit, they stopped doing it, and I really never came back after that. I think they may still, if they're still doing it at all, they're using DVDs now. So
yeah. Back to the new ISIS. I'm curious, because you triggered something in my mind earlier, and that is, I remember when I saw, I guess it was a Facebook announcement for a program that they were having, and it was a kind of thing where show up and vote for which film we're going to show. There's going to be an option, maybe 3 options or something like that, and we'll take a vote and see which one you're going to run.
What you do is you come in there, and they've got this notebook that's got lists of all these films, and that's everything they've got to run. And the way it works is the first person to show up gets to pick the film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, well, do you ever have problems with that? One time he said, we had a guy come in and he picked Casablanca. And then he said, I'm going to run out and grab some dinner. I'll be right back. And so he did that. And while he was gone, a bunch of kids showed up and they wanted to see, I think, European Vacation or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
And
it must be an eclectic list they've got.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of James Bond stuff. But when the guy came back and, they they told the kids, that, well, no, somebody's already picked Casablanca. So they were like, well, I guess we'll go ahead and see it anyway. And afterwards, we're just like, it was the greatest film they'd ever seen. So,
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the way they operate. So
that's interesting. Now, you mentioned Spanky McFarlane's brother. Have you ever had any celebrities of note attend any of these screenings that you've been involved with?
No, not really. I mean, local celebrities maybe, but no, not really. But I started doing something last year, mainly because I'm retired and don't have much else to do. For a while, what I was doing was I'd made a lot of friends when I'd been to Cinecon out in LA. I used to go to that every year, and some on the East Coast and Cinevent, which is in Columbus, Ohio. And I just met a lot of people, including a lot of authors, like Joe Adamson,
Right.
And so I decided that, what would be cool is if I could get these guys to intro my movies. So for a while, what I was doing was using Zoom, and I would get in touch with them. And I had an extra laptop that I set up in the front of the room so that I could put it into my system. So beginning of the show, you'd have the guy projected up on the screen, and he would do a little intro. And like when I ran Beau's Jest,
Frank Thompson,
yeah. I got Frank Thompson to do it. And Frank, he has shell casings. He went out to the desert where they shot it.
Yeah, he talked about that.
Yeah, he's got shell casings and parts of the fort and all. And he held those up and showed them. It was really cool.
Wow. Now, did they do those intros live, or did you record them and then project them?
When it started, it was live. I was going to be running one film, and City Lights. And there's a guy up in Connecticut who's written a couple of books. His name is Lou Sabini. And Lou's a really nice guy. And so I contacted him and said, would you be interested in doing this? And he said, well, I wouldn't mind doing it. He said, the only problem is that we have plans that night. And so it just kind of like the light bulb went off over my head. Why are you not recording this? So I told him, I said, well, I can do it anytime you want, and we'll record it. So he did that, and I recorded it, and then I was able to put B-roll in, and I digitized The Gentleman Tramp, the documentary. So I was able to get like behind the scenes footage of Chaplin directing City Lights and all, and put that in. And it turned out really nice. So I started doing that every month, and I used a friend of mine who's a film professor over at SMU. I used him to do a couple of them. I was going to do The More the Merrier, Joel McRae and Jean Arthur and Charles Coburn.
How do you do?
How do you do?
I'm Benjamin Dingle.
You certainly are.
I'm about the apartment.
I'm sorry, I've already rented it.
Just a moment, young lady. Do you think you know me well enough to lie to me?
Yes.
Even so, you shouldn't do it. Do you realize that practically most of the trouble in the world comes from people lying to people? Just take Hitler, for instance.
I'm sorry, mister, but I prefer...
Mr. Dingle.
Mr. Dingle, I prefer sharing my apartment with a lady.
That's fine. So would I.
And got in touch with Lou, and I said, would you be interested in doing that? And he said, I could, but he said, I'm friends with Peter McRae, Joel's son, and I bet he'd love to do it. So he set that up, and so I recorded that, and that was really nice,
Yeah.
And so I've been kind of doing that sort of thing.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah. What's the largest audience that you've projected for?
The largest one I had, which was all here in my living room, was 29 people, and you could not move around. I mean, it was, but the film was Glenn or Glenda.
Oh, oh man.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
He dares to enter the street dressed in the clothes he so much desires to wear. Glenn is engaged to be married to Barbara. Glenn's problem is a deep one, but he must tell her soon. She's begun to notice things. Soon she will realize.
But beyond that, I mean, at one of these venues where you're at a theater or a festival or something like that, what would you say the largest crowd has been?
Probably, I did a show about 10 years ago at the Texas Theater, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu right around Halloween. It was a double feature. And I had a friend who has since moved out of town who was a music teacher at DISD school. And he loved the music of the 20s and 30s. And so he would play along with silence occasionally, And so we had that set up for him to play live. And he sent word out to all the schools, all his other music teacher friends. And I think they offered the kids extra credit if they went to the show. So, and it just packed the downstairs there. There's probably 850 to 900 people down there.
That would have been fun. I remember I somewhere along the line, I acquired an 8mm print of Nosferatu. It wasn't a Blackhawk print, but a friend and I, he was having a Halloween party. This is when I was in high school. He was having a Halloween party. And so we thought, okay, let's show this print of Nosferatu. And we put together a soundtrack using music from The Omen, Psycho, and Jaws. And it was pretty effective.
Yeah.
And it was fun. So which tend to be the most popular types of films, either in terms of genres or stars or directors or that of the ones that you tend to screen?
Well, I think comedies usually do the best. As far as if I'm running a feature here, there's all sorts of stuff people like. I think that the one that really got people the most was Laura. That was probably that.
You have rarely met a girl like Laura. Few women have been so beautiful, so exotic, so dangerous to know.
You're Laura Hunt, aren't you?
Yes.
I'm Shelby Carpenter. Want to dance?
I'm not alone.
Oh, you poor girl. I bet he still does the polka.
Yes, Betsy Ross taught it to me.
But as far as getting people out at these venues, Dallas is not a great city for classic films. It's not really into old stuff. And the only way that we've really gotten big crowds is to make it an event, to have live music playing along with it silent. So that's the only way that we've gotten big crowds.
Yeah, I think it's a select audience pretty much anywhere short of, I mean, other than obviously LA, that's, and New York, I assume, but just about anywhere else. I think,
one of the problems too is that you can't really advertise, so it's got to be kind of a word of mouth thing or, I think that Texas did a little bit of advertising.
Which films do you get the biggest kick out of showing?
Comedies.
Yeah. Do you more silent versus sound?
Well, I run sound because mainly the people in my group, if I run silent, about half of them are asleep by the end of the first film, so they just don't really have a whole lot of tolerance for silent film.
Okay. So more Jerry Lewis than Max Linder?
Yeah. Well, mostly Preston Sturges. I'm a big Preston Sturges fan. So.
Oh, okay. All right. So now having a little bit of experience in the booth myself, because you may have moved from Tulsa by this time, but if you remember the Williams Center Cinema.
Oh,
downtown,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I ended up managing that for a period of time while I was in college. And the regional chain that it was part of made the decision to fire the projectionist union. Yeah. And so we managers became manager projectionists.
Yeah.
So having had that experience, I know there are what you, I guess, would call projection booth mishaps. Have you experienced any that would be interesting to talk about?
I've been pretty lucky on the shows I run here. I did have one instance where, and this really changed the way I deal, because I was, I've had some of these prints for 15 years and have never screened them. I just got too many. So I set up a show for the Columbia film, You Are Never Lovelier.
That's the title of our big new musical at Columbia.
Starring Fred Astaire, Rita Hayworth,
and Adolphe Menjou.
As well as Xavier Cugat, the Rumba King, and his world-famous orchestra.
Playing some of the loveliest music ever written by Jerome Kern and Johnny Mercer.
And the night of the show, I pretty much pulled it out of the box where it had been for 15 years and put it on the projector. And when I started running it, well, the print was dry. So it was like jumping in the gate. And it was just a big mess. At one point, it just wouldn't run. The projector would just stop down.
Wow.
So I told everybody to take a break, and I went and got my DVD of the same film and put it in the machine, and we ran it off video that night. So that's been probably the worst problem I've had at home. But I have plenty of stories to tell you about when I worked at Channel 8 in Tulsa, because we were still running everything off film then, running movies. The station would buy these film packages, and they were discount film packages, and they were black and white prints of color films, because the studio still had a bunch of these prints left over from the black and white days. So they were trying to get some money out of them. But occasionally, when we booked the film, they didn't have a black and white print, so they would send us a color print. So I would get the film reels, and there would be a note on it that said "run in black and white," which, you can kill the color burst on the film chain. And I just thought that was stupid,
Yeah.
Even though that was what they had bought, So every time that happened, I forget that. I ran it in color. Nobody ever said anything or did anything about it. So one Saturday night, the Saturday night movie was War Wagon.
I've made a lot of westerns in my time, but never one like the War Wagon. The War Wagon is a story about friendship and understanding.
You're worth 12,000 to me. Dead.
And 100,000 alive.
The War Wagon is a story of humility. Mine hit the ground first.
Mine was taller.
So I get the print, and there's a note on it that says "run in black and white." And oh, come on, this is ridiculous. So I went in, loaded it up, and started running the film. Everything was fine. And then when I changed reels to go to reel 2, reels 2 and 3 were black and white.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. And the phone kind of melted off the wall. So.
Yeah.
Hey, operator. Hey, you up there running this film. I'd like to see that last part over again.
Oh, he can't do that. The management won't let him do it. What's the matter? Are you crazy or something?
He'll do it for us. I got him the job.
That happened. There was, I was running one of the Universal horror movies, the Spider-Woman.
So Sherlock Holmes.
We started the movie. You probably remember the Plenty Scary movie in Channel 8.
Not really. I remember Fantastic Theater, and then of course,
that was on Channel 2.
Yeah, and then of
this
course,
was in the late
Zeppa.
70s. Yeah, but anyway, so we're running this movie. So I started the movie, and there was like a 10-minute segment, and then I went to the first break. I ran the commercials, and then when I went back, I rolled the wrong projector.
Oh,
so I went right to reel 2. Nobody noticed. So we're sitting there, and I've got the clock running on the segment, and when it was time for the next commercial to come up, I'm sitting there waiting, and nothing's showing up, and I'm like, man, this is missed time. And about a minute or so later, there's a break, so I run the break, and I'm like, well, that's really weird, and finish the break, and I go back and roll the projector. So I'm sitting there, and we got another like 40 minutes of this film.
Sergeant, take care of that suitcase. There's valuable evidence inside it, and it's alive.
I'll take care of it, sir.
I'm sitting there, and I asked our audio guy, I said, does this sound like it's wrapping up? And he goes, yeah, it kind of does, Just then the end flashes on the screen. And I'm like, oh, God, And you got to yell at the tape guy and say, do you have the next show queued up, because we're going to. Yeah, but.
Okay. Now, are you still building your collection?
I try not to, because it's just so big right now that I could run a film every week for the rest of my life and not run out of film, And
is there any holy grail that you still have your eye out for?
Well, the one I've been looking for that I've never been able to find is the RBC print of The Kid with Chaplin. I've had a print of The Kid, but it's always been one of those cheap knockoff prints, which has a bad music track on it and a very soft picture. But if you get the RBCs, they're just sharp as a tack, and they've got Chaplin's score on them. So,
okay.
But I've got RBC prints of Circus and Gold Rush and Modern Times and The Great Dictator, but haven't been able to get The Kid. So.
Well, good luck with that. Hopefully it'll drop into your lap soon in some way. All right. Well, I guess now the only thing left is to ask you the question that I ask all my guests, which is, what's your most memorable movie-going experience? And please do not let it be when we tried to go see The Longest Yard.
Let's see. Probably one of the best I've had was there's a guy who lives up in North Dallas who sells theater equipment and has built this house that has a 36-seat theater in it. That's just state of the art. I mean, it's got everything you'd ever want in a theater. And he had a little gathering of local film people, and my group got invited. So we went down there, and he ran Moulin Rouge, because that had just been in theaters recently. And
so you're talking about the Baz Luhrmann version,
right?
Not the previous one with Jose Ferrer.
Right, which was okay. I had already seen it, but it was still a really nice presentation of it.
I honestly did not care for that film. I thought that, this is like what, imagine if Tim Burton and Ken Russell ever went out together and got really drunk and made a movie before they sobered up. This is kind of what you'd have.
Yeah, I wasn't really able to get into it much, not even the second time. Then we went to dinner and we came back, and he ran it was that first Star Trek reboot.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he ran that, and it was the cleanest presentation I'd ever seen. I mean, it was just sharp as a tack. And his sound system there was just, you could just feel everything that happened, I mean, it was just, and comfortable chairs. It was just a really nice experience there. But, other than that, I've had a lot of experience with silence with live scores, like at Cinecon and Cinevent and all that. There's some really good companies up there, and some of those have just been really memorable. The one that I really regret, because I was just kind of broke at the time, I should have sold my car or something when they had the Napoleon screening out in Oakland.
Oh, yeah.
Paramount Theater. Almost everybody I knew went to it, but I was like, I got to save money. Yeah. Now, I've got the BBC Blu-ray of that presentation, but it's just not quite the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I was actually going to run it for my group, but when I looked at the Blu-ray, when you get to the triptych at the end, instead of being a full screen triptych,
it goes letterbox
it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's tiny all of a sudden. So it's.
Yeah, that's true, but it is an amazing film.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, listen, it's been fun reminiscing both individually and collectively, our past experiences together. So I'm glad we had a chance to do this. Be sure and keep me posted on upcoming events that you may be involved in that I can maybe talk up or perhaps attend. Who knows?
Okay.
But
did I put you in my group, the Dallas Classic Film Collectors group?
I don't know.
Well,
to be honest. Okay.
Yeah, because I ran a video show last month because I'd just gotten a new Blu-ray of Target.
Bogdanovich?
The Bogdanovich, yeah.
I've never seen that.
Yeah. Oh, you should see it. It's really, really interesting. Okay. And it's very timely, too, because, it's about guns and crazy people,
Well, I'll have to put that on my catch-up list, maybe right behind Double Indemnity.
Let me tell you one more thing, too.
Sure.
One of my favorite films that I screened outside the house was in October of 2019. They asked me to come and project Bride of Frankenstein at the Majestic Theater downtown, which is the last movie palace that's in Dallas.
That's one I want to visit, and in part because one of my favorite movies, Phantom of the Paradise, was shot there.
Right. Yeah, a friend of mine, Paul Bunnell, who's has directed a film, which I can't remember the name of it now. That was the opening film at the Oak Cliff Film Festival. I knew him from California, but they invited him in to do Q&A after the film and all that. So I chauffeured him around town, and he said, what I really want to see is I want to see the Majestic Theater because Phantom of the Paradise is my favorite film. And so we got hold of the people who run it, which it's a city, city runs the theater. And they said, fine. And so we went over there and we went from basement to attic, and it was pretty cool. But I've done a few shows there. Mostly they run stuff off a Barco video projector. So it's, I don't really have much to do with the feature. But Barack Epstein, who runs the Texas Theater and is the guy who kind of runs the shows at those Majestic screenings, I asked him, I said, well, if you want, I'll bring a projector over and we can run a cartoon beforehand. He said, oh, great. So to me, it was just being able to run one of my films in the Majestic Theater on that big screen, was worth hauling all the stuff up there. So
yeah, that would be a memorable movie showing experience beyond the movie going. So that's another cool story. Well, once again, my guest has been film collector and showman Jim Reid. Jim, thanks for joining me on Movie Nights and Matinees.
Sure. It was a pleasure.
And as always, my thanks to you listeners. I hope you enjoyed this episode's Off the Beaten Path topic. Please remember to leave a rating wherever you listen and a review if possible, whether on Apple Podcasts, the Movie Nights and Matinees Facebook page, or by way of the comments link on the podcast website. Also, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you listen so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Episode 14 should be especially exciting because, well...
You're not thinking that.
I sure am, boy. Ever heard of Evel Knievel?